Next one, once again, talking about the federal government here, the federal CISO clarifies their support for a standard that could make passwords a thing of the past. So getting rid of passwords completely. And I will be honest, and I'm sure that John will agree. We read this article and it didn't read well, but the intent and purpose was basically this. You know, the federal space, and if you've got any experience with the federal space, then you're familiar with cat cards. And so the cat cards are what they use in order to access anything. And inside these cards are chips where, it encrypts all your information and authenticates who you are. And so you punch that or plug that card into a reader anytime that you want to access federal equipment, computers and things of that nature. They've been around for years. When I was in the military, when I was in the army, we called them smart cards, and your smart card carried everything, your bank balances, everything else like that you paid with it and everything else. And so same thing, same concept. Been around for years. The one big advantage that they're saying that comes with these cat cards is that it gives you the ability to, if one's lost or stolen, you can turn it off, and everybody in the entire organization and those connected to the organization know that it's an invalid card. So it reduces the possibility of stolen or lost or stolen credentials. So I get that, and I get it in the federal government space. Where I don't get it in context of this article is they talk about pushing it into the private sector. And so with that, I'll go ahead and kick it over to you, John. Let you give your hot takes on this thing before I monopolize my position on this one.
Yeah, I was going to say I think you were a little bit more fired up on this one, like I was on the previous topic. Uh, I'm all for creating a more frictionless workflow for individuals. I've seen some of the tech that's out there as we're trying to move away from passwords. Still do hear people all the time can't remember the passwords. They're still not using password managers and things of that nature. And I know that the federal government has started consolidating at least their authentication through certain portals like login.gov. I've had to go through that process personally myself. Still requires a password. And I've used other programs that where I personally have seen, obviously I've been around people that have used cat cards. I've never had one myself, but where I've had to have digital certificates on my computer. So on top of my, username and password, I had to have the ECA certificate on the computer as a third option. So I get all that stuff. It's going to be what's the cost of this? What's going to be the retraining purposes? The government has a lot of legacy systems that are out there, and I kid you not, I've heard the stories of you got very small teams. So you think the government is this big, gigantic, conglomerate, but when you start really driving down into silos of these little small functional areas, they may be very, very small teams when you think about
Razor thin.
how it works. So
Yes.
some of these legacy things was like two people wrote the software over the course of a weekend, and then it kind of morphed over the next 10 years into some stuff. I've seen what that looks like. So how is the government looking to integrate this new technology into a lot of legacy stuff without requiring a wholesale change of some of these programs that have been in place for a very long time? That I know because I've seen them again that have even like cross-site scripting errors, SQL injection errors. I don't not get, but not get too far in the weeds. Don't want to get into the weeds at all. But basically, really common coding, security issues. That is this are those things going to be rectified in that process? That will this even work with the new technology that's coming out there? How are they going to aim this and prioritize this type of stuff? So, and then to talking about moving it to the public sector, again, great. I think instead of having cat cards, I don't understand that. It's going to be your phones. Everybody's phone at some point will probably be the third party identifier. But that's kind of the way I view this stuff. I like the frictionless thing. NIST has changed their standards with what password policies should be over time. But take it, man. I mean, I know this is bugging you, so
Well, because I get it, and I fall back into the same position that I fell into when it came to the school districts, which is great that you're bringing awareness because as a society we have weak password habits, and whenever they still post out the list of the worst used passwords, and you still have people out there using password as their password or password 1234, people still use it. So we're creatures of habits. We have bad bad password habits. I get it. I get it. So how do we combat that? Well, you can teach people to make more complex passwords. I agree with the NIST new rollout where they say, you know, get away from changing your password every 90 or 160 180 days or 120 days, I think, depending upon where you what you were in. Change your password every 3 months. That's tough, man. And not being able to duplicate it for 6 cycles, that used to be kind of the rule of thumb. But now we've realized that the longer the password, the better. And so using passphrases and not changing them so often, because by forcing people to change their passwords often, because it's hard for them to come up with stuff that they can remember, that's why they were making easier passwords to crack. And so I get it. So we've got an issue when it comes to passwords. So how do you get around it? The idea of the cat card is really no different than going back to USB dongles as a second form of authentication. But like you said, why do I need that whenever I've got this? I can set up multi-factor authentication. I can get an authentication code sent to my phone. Everybody has a phone. I just don't see how you roll out, or why you would need to roll out this massive of a system. It already exists in the government sector, so I get that. But in the private sector, it doesn't make sense to me, because you're trying to shove something down, or the idea is to push something down, or an ideology down, where it's a hard enough time getting people to really turn on two-factor authentication on all their stuff. You know how much that would simplify the risk, or reduce your risk when it comes to credential harvesting and things of that nature. Turn on two-factor authentication. Almost every application out there nowadays has it built into it, and it'll authenticate to your phone. And there's plenty of authenticators out there, so it's an easy solution. So I don't understand why the federal government is pushing this whenever there's already an easy solution out there in the market space. That's the reason why I'm upset with it, and not really upset with it, but just I'm like, yep, this is another thing where they're focusing their efforts in the wrong space, because there's already a solution out there. We just got to get people to understand the value of it, so they actually start to use it and take advantage of it. That's it.
Yeah, and I'm going to take this to a super high level. So if you're in kind of in the business space and you're listening to this, I want you to think about authenticating who you are based on the three different types that are out there that are taught. It's a core fundamental. So there's three types. There's something you know, there's something you have, and there's something you are. So you think about your passwords, you think about these cat cards as something you've had, and then you have fingerprint readers, retina scans, palm readings. If you've ever went, as I just make my camera go nuts, that's shaking my hand at it. Um, is the motion tracking. So you find it funny because I keep doing this during tests. So if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, because I talk with my hands a lot, I've got a tracking camera, and I make it have a mind of its own. But anyway, those are the three fundamentals when you think about passwords. So they're in the two different types. So you got two-factor authentication, which can be two things that two of the same of those, and multi-factor authentication would be a combination of two different of those types. So definitely think about that. Going forward as you're looking at your own authentication principles. I would say, regardless of whatever the government decides to do, and then reverse themselves, a year
As
later.
they tend to do. But
Yes.
but I think you hit the nail on the head, which is, at the end of the day, this is a risk mitigation factor. When we start talking about passwords and understanding that, most organizations and most employees, let's not even put the organization level, let's go down to the individual user level. Users have a tendency to have weak password habits.
Yep.
It's just you can't get around all of that. The best of training can't get around all of that. And so the way that you mitigate that, once again, mitigating risk here, is to use multi-factor, two-factor authentication, because the way that I like to describe it to executives is, treat it as an early warning detection system. If somebody actually happens to steal your login credentials, so they've got your username and your password, two-factor authentication lets you know that somebody else has your username and password, because they're trying to use it to access an account, because you get an alert on your phone that says, hey,
I just
here's
had
the
it happen.
authentication code.
I had it happen to me. I use, like a lot of people in the government, particularly the Marines. They use Microsoft Office 365.
Yep.
I went through this was a few weeks ago. I went through a period of, it was 24 or 48 hours, where every couple of hours somebody was trying to ding me into there, And luckily, I've got multi-factor authentication. It requires a face scan for me to authenticate. So for you to get into my office, not only do you have to have the credentials, you would have to kidnap me to use my face to get into there. But because I had that, I would just look at it and laugh. I actually posted something on LinkedIn about this going, it was like, not today,
Yeah.
not.
But and that's what it is, and that's why I tell executives it's the early warning detection system that you don't really have to pay ongoing costs for,
Yeah.
because it's the easiest way to combat weak password use within your organization. It's such an easy way to add a layer of protection, but we can talk about that forever.
Absolutely.